Good evening and welcome to the Issaquah City Council regular meeting this Monday, August 5th. The first order of business today is the Pledge of Allegiance, and anybody who'd like to join the council on the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is nice to see that we have some audience and staff members tonight on this really gorgeous summer evening, and you chose to spend your time with us. Thank you very much. The first item under special business is a certificate of appreciation that I'd like to hand out this evening. I think for most everyone here tonight, you know that we have a retirement of sorts happening. City Administrator Moon, who has been with the city for 5 years, is moving off for a wonderful family experience. And I wanted to take a few moments and thank her for the service for what she has done for the city of Issaquah. Emily hates this stuff, so don't look at her face because she doesn't like it when people talk about her. I think the city administrator's job might be one of the hardest jobs out there. They have a huge responsibility in dealing not only with managing a very large and strong and talented professional team, but they also work with an elected body, and we can be like a herd of cats sometimes. So it's two very different feelings. Besides that, they're a face out in the community who is helping to channel the voice and the community needs into everything that we do at a really high level. I've gotten to work with Emily much closer over this last year and a half as mayor, and I will tell you that she is an amazing public servant. It is public service first. It shows in everything that she does. I haven't met anyone or worked with anyone who's worked this hard before. I wish I could show you all of the hours that she puts in, but at least Council President Martz had the opportunity of seeing a couple of her timesheets. It's an incredible heavy lift, and she did it this last year and a half when we were not even completely staffed. So she took a large body of work on those very broad shoulders of her. And as a mayor and for our community, I'm really grateful for what she did. So I'd like to call her up here today and thank her in front of you for her service, and let her know that we wish her very well on her next adventure, which is a much bigger playground than ours. Emily, congratulations. So I have a certificate of appreciation this evening for Emily. I'm sure when her family returns from their fantastic adventure, there will be a city or a county or some other public agency who will benefit from her public service. I'm just glad we got to have her for 5 years. Thank you. Can I get a seat? Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is ID 0513, a Regional Coalition for Housing Program Update. There will be no council action this evening. This is an informational update, and I'd like to invite City Administrator Emily Moon to come up and make the presentation. Thank you, Emily.
Great, thank you. Tonight, I will be giving just a simply brief update on recent executive board actions from the Arch Executive Board. Council will receive more information in September when staff returns to give a presentation about a new revenue source that the state legislature recently adopted, and that is specific to providing additional affordable housing or supporting affordable housing programs. And also, staff will be back in front of you in October to discuss the mayor's preliminary budget, and within it, some recommendations concerning Arch. But tonight, I want to give a very brief status update and an early opportunity to highlight future council conversations related to Arch. So as council is aware, and as we have discussed here in this forum and through the city's website, Arch Executive Board commissioned a report of the home ownership program in December of 2018, and that report was received by the board in mid-2019. That report gave us some really great information. It reconfirmed that Arch is doing many of the right things, many best practices, but also helped to underscore some of the issues that Arch has been facing. In particular, Arch in the homeownership program has experienced some serious compliance issues. It's only affected a small portion of the portfolio, but wherever there are violations and wherever the program is not working according to design, that's an issue and one that the executive board has taken action to resolve. One of the things that the report pointed out to us is that the program has grown significantly over the decades, and those issues are likely to get worse over time as the gap in affordability increases and as additional units become part of the portfolio. So the consultant recommended some changes to current policies and also to staffing level of Arch in order to curb the tide on a gradual loss of affordability and an increase in any compliance issues. So the board has looked at all of those recommendations, is already making some changes to practices and program policies, including updating our resale formula, looking at language that would give us stronger abilities in the case of anticipated foreclosures, stronger monitoring and compliance procedures, which would be staff-led. And therefore, all of those new activities or enhanced activities will require more staffing capacity. So with that, the Arch Executive Board recently approved a transfer from the reserve fund and the City of Kirkland committed funds, if they're needed, to provide 2 limited term positions for the remainder of this year and throughout 2020 or until a point in time when municipalities have adopted their 2020 budget and are providing any additional funding. The first position is a housing program administrator, and that person would be responsible for administering the whole home ownership program. This would put one individual in a position to really track the performance of the portfolio, establish some program metrics, and work on legal frameworks that are lacking right now or are just not standardized. Second position would be an associate planner that would serve as the lead in monitoring and compliance for our rental projects, Arch's rental projects. That portion of the portfolio in the most recent years has grown more substantially than the home ownership program, and that is one that we have been watching for some time and been aware that we'll need some augmented staffing capacity. So the 2020 Arch budget hasn't been approved yet by the board. We would anticipate doing so sometime this fall. But as we look to add some staffing capacity on a temporary basis, I'm anticipating the executive board will want to make a recommendation to make those positions permanent. And the board is also going to be contemplating potential funding sources for those 2 positions and possibly a third. 2 of the things that the board has been discussing recently are House Bill 1406, which is that new enabling legislation that would allow the city to retain part of the sales tax that currently is remitted to the state. It would be a tax credit that we could leverage in order to fulfill some of our affordable housing goals. The second mechanism would be implementing some new program fees, which are typical across affordable housing programs in the United States and which Arch, for the most part, lacks. I'm anticipating at this point in time that the mayor's preliminary 2020 budget will include a recommendation to add an increase to the city's share of the administrative fee to Arch. That's the smaller component of our Arch budget each year. I'm anticipating that increase might be about $25,000. That's our proportional share of those 3 anticipated regular full-time positions. The second piece of our budget is typically our Housing Trust Fund contribution, and as staff will present to you in September with House Bill 1406 passage, we believe that would be a good source of funding to both help provide the additional funding for the administrative fee and for the Housing Trust Fund contribution. The estimated value of that sales tax credit revenue to the city is $125,000. So we will be back in September and October to talk a little bit more about that state legislative action and to secure concurrence on how to take advantage of it. And then in October to present the proposed budget. Along the way, I anticipate staff will continue to provide you with an update on the executive board's actions and what was included in their recommended budget for 2020. With that, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Not seeing any questions. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda this evening is ID 0515, Newport Way Northwest, Maple to Sunset Update and Section 4F use. And I'd like to invite Senior Engineer John Mortensen to make a presentation. Hi, John.
Good evening. I'm John Mortensen with the Public Works Engineering Department. Tonight I'm here to talk about the Newport Way Maple to Sunset project. I'll be providing a brief project update and discussing a potential Section 4F use. So the project, Newport Way Maple to Sunset, as the name would indicate, it's along Newport Way, and it begins at Maple, which is where Target and Trader Joe's is at, and it goes to Sunset. Project will build roundabouts at Juniper, Holly, and Dogwood. It'll add pedestrian facilities. There'll be a sidewalk on one side, a shared use path on the other. It'll add bike lanes, landscaping, make modifications to the 2 traffic signals on both ends of the project, and upgrade utilities and underground overhead utilities. A little background on the project funding. The city has a design grant for $1.2 million, which we're using to currently design the project. Back in 2016, the city and WashDOT worked together to repurpose an unspent earmark from the Southeast Bypass project, and the amount was about $3.6 million. And fast forward to 2019, the city has until the end of the current federal fiscal year, which ends on September 30th, to have these funds get obligated in order to have them not lapse. And if that were to happen, the city would lose these federal funds. The plan is to obligate $1.2 million to the design phase and fully fund the design. And with the remaining $2.4 million, it'll be obligated to an early right-of-way acquisition project. An early right-of-way acquisition project is where you use money to acquire right-of-way earlier than you normally would in a project. And for the early right-of-way acquisition, city staff worked to identify up to 11 parcels that would be good candidates for right-of-way acquisition. And one of the parcels is the parcel with Issaquah Valley Elementary. That school has a playground and a ball field that might be considered a recreational facility. So about Section 4F use, the U.S. Department of Transportation Act of 1966, Section 4F, provided for consideration of park recreational lands, wildlife and waterfowl refuges, and historic sites during transportation planning. Section 4F applies to projects that receive federal funds through the U.S. Department of Transportation, which Newport Way does. As I mentioned, one of the properties, the Issaquah Valley Elementary, has a ball field, and we're targeting that as a potential right-of-way acquisition. And in our discussions with WashDOT, they said this could be considered a 4F facility or might not, and due to the time constraint we're under, they recommended that we treat it as a Section 4F property rather than determining if it met the criteria. As a potential Section 4F property, the Federal Highway Administration must determine that the city's use of the property would have a de minimis impact. A de minimis impact is one that will not adversely affect the features or attributes of the Section 4F property. As part of the process, for FHWA to make the determination, the city is required to discuss the use of Section 4F at a city council meeting, which is why I'm here tonight. The city is confident that the acquisition of the right-of-way from Issaquah Valley Elementary will not adversely affect the features, attributes, and activities that qualify the resource for Section 4F protection. Last week, city staff met with Issaquah School District staff and discussed the right-of-way acquisition and in regards to the Section 4F protection for the ball field. And there were no concerns raised during the meeting, and the school district is preparing a letter that will state that the project will not adversely affect the features, attributes, and activities that qualify the resource for 4F protection. The next steps in the process are, once we have the letter from the school district, we have a Section 4F de minimis checklist that's been prepared, and we'll be submitting those to WashDOT, who will be giving this to FHWA for approval. Once that is approved, the city will submit the paperwork to get our National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, approval for the right-of-way acquisition, which will allow us to obligate the funds before they lapse. And, oops, I forgot to. So I meant to show you guys, here's where you can look at the map, you can see the ball field, and you can see the roundabout at Hawley, along with the right-of-way that we are looking to acquire. And with that, we can have discussion or questions.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions? Councilmember Walsh?
Thank you. So to clarify, what you're looking to do is acquire some of the land from Issaquah Valley Elementary in order to have what you need to build the roundabout, not that you're looking to acquire all of the ball field and area.
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein?
That was my question as well, but
okay.
could you just give us some numbers? Like, I'm looking at the diagram, so how much of this land?
The total, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
So the total between the 11 parcels, we're looking to acquire about 1 acre, and of that, about a half acre is at Issaquah Valley Elementary, so it's about half of what we're looking to acquire for the early acquisition.
Okay, in this diagram, where are the boundaries of the acquisition? So it says the 2000, there's one line that's mentioned, 2011 proposed ROW. That it?
I'll go back to the microphone. So I pointed to where the new right-of-way line will be, and then in red is the current right-of-way line.
Okay, so it's labeled the 2011 proposed ROW on that chart?
Yes, and
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilmember Hunt, Councilmember Ray, Council President Mertz.
I didn't really understand the statements that were made about the classification as a 4F property. So you said that that the WashDOT advised the city to treat it as a 4F property rather than determine it if it fits the criteria or not. So if it didn't fit the criteria, what's the impact?
So if it doesn't fit the criteria, then we would not need to discuss the Section 4F use and do the de minimis checklist. And FHWA would not need to make a determination, and we'd be able to obligate the funds. The risk to doing that is we submit all of our paperwork for approval, and we would get denied and not be able to obligate the funds. So this is just playing it on the safe side.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
So not so much interested in, well, I'm very interested in the 4F and this particular parcel, but I'm more interested in the 3 point whatever million dollars in federal funds that was originally earmarked for the bypass. So if we don't do anything along this stretch of road, what happens to those federal funds that we would be granted? So we're going to be spending money on design, and we're going to be spending money on right-of-way acquisition. And what happens, and what's the timeline?
I'm Sheldon Lynn with the Department of Public Works Engineering. The funds that were earmarked and repurposed from the bypass, the $3.6 million, if we do not use them on this project, they go back to the federal government. We're not allowed to use them on another project.
Could you explain why, Sheldon?
WashDOT and FHWA have said that these funds could only be repurposed to one other project and are not allowed to be repurposed to any other project once they were repurposed. They were repurposed back in 2016, which is when we had notification that they were made available.
I'm not sure that
Fully
was-
answer your question?
No, I think I was actually going in kind of slightly different direction.
Okay, so-
But that was very interesting too,
Okay,
thank you.
so help me along here with your question.
No, my question is really about, is this a grant, and we can acquire right of way and we can do design work along Newport Way, and if we never build out that designed work, that's all good and well, or is there some stipulation that we have to actually, if we do right-of-way acquisition and we do design work with the federal money, we actually have to do something?
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the first question that you just repeated. That is similar to rules that we've discussed in other forums about federal money made available during the design and right-of-way phases. And in the RCWs, the federal CFRs, it states that once you've gotten substantially complete through the right-of-way phase using federal money, you have about 20 more years before there's a time frame in which FHWA has to make a decision on whether or not those funds are repayable or not back to the federal government if you don't proceed with construction. It's not hard and fast. FHWA hasn't made a specific ruling like they did on the design money, which said you had 10 years, I believe it was, to proceed to the next phase, which was right-of-way acquisition or construction. So does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that's great, thanks, Sheldon.
Council President Martz.
So if I'm hearing correct, we will have documentation from the district that they are not opposed to this activity prior to having to make any formal decision as a council body?
Correct.
All right.
Thank you. Other questions? There's a couple. Okay, great. That's it. Thank you very much, John. Next item on the agenda this evening is audience comments, and this is your time to address your council and your mayor. The guidelines for public participation will be displayed on the screen. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you signed up, you will be called first, but if you did not sign up, I will ask to see if anybody else would like to speak. If you're here as part of representing a group, please identify which group, if you're a spokesperson. And if you are listening this evening and you want to let the council know that you are in support of any of the comments that you hear from anybody who talks with council this evening, please raise your hand so they get an understanding of the level of support. Tisha, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, Larry Franks.
Good evening, Mayor Pauly, the council members and city staff. My name is Larry Franks. I reside at 24001 Southeast 103rd Street here in Issaquah, Washington, and I also represent the Friends of the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery that will come up later as fish. We think it's cute. So my goal in the next 4 minutes is to share the 40 million years of history of salmon in the Pacific Northwest. So the oldest fossil remains that we know of are from 40 million years ago. The modern versions that we see here now, we have coho and chinook that come to the Issaquah area, are roughly 4 million years old. They've been very resilient in the past. What they've done in response to ice ages, so imagine 12,000 years ago, we were covered with 3,000 feet of ice right here where we stand. And how the salmon responded to that is as the ice moved south, they moved south. So 12,000 years ago, our salmon were thriving down in Mexico. What's happening now through global warming, first normal, now man-caused, is driving them north. So hypothetical question, what happens to these fish if there's no place north for them to go to? Think about the Arctic refuge and the pressure that it's under. Ice ages also periodically cut off access to the sea, and that's led us to having the kokanee population. So these are landlocked sockeye salmon that basically, found out that they could no longer get to the ocean, so they stop at the lake. Fast forward a little bit to our area. There's no historical record of anadromous fish that made it out to the ocean from Issaquah Creek at all. The records for other rivers close to us in the Lake Washington watershed, so Cedar River, White River, are very erratic, but there were chum and chinook that came from those rivers. The whole Lake Washington basin was majorly replumbed in 1917 when the Chittenden locks went in. That's also what enabled the Issaquah hatchery, which came in 1937, that started by trying to raise sockeye, which are famous for needing lakes as part of their environment, and chinook. The chinook were brought here from the Cedar River. It turns out that at the time we didn't know that sockeye have a virus basically that flares up if you confine them, if you try to raise them in a hatchery. So those died out, but the chinook stayed healthy. We added coho a little bit later. Historically, kokanee were abundant in Issaquah Creek. In fact, in the 70s, the Department of Fisheries policy was to let the kokanee come up. They'd go into the spawning pond, the pond would be drained, and the fish would be killed. The fear then was that they were a disease vector, that we would catch stuff, the hatchery fish would catch stuff from the wild fish. It turns out the risk was actually in the other direction. Elsewhere in the state, the Columbia River used to regularly produce 15 million fish a year in the 1920s. Forecast this year is for 1.3 million, and we're not even close to that. In terms of Issaquah Salmon Hatchery, as recently as 2007, we had 13,000 fish return. Last year, we had less than 2,000, and we're running below that forecast now. We're in trouble. Lesson learned overall, the chinook were declared endangered in 1999, all chinook in Puget Sound, and they have not been recovered. Whatever it is that we're doing, we're not doing it right. So what do we do in the future? So one of the initiatives that Fish is looking at now is various science that as we discover them, we're going to be bringing them to City of Issaquah, other elected officials to act on, to try to save these fish. We have an elected officials day coming up on October 1st. All of you are elected. We have a number of RSVPs. We're going to be sharing some of the things that can be done to to help out these fish. I have a closing quote. I hear the budget.
We'll let you have your closing quote.
You
Go
do?
ahead. Go
Oh, okay. Governor of Washington saying, "We are presently faced with a desperate situation on salmon. The ugly truth is, if we continue as we have been doing for the last few years, our salmon stocks are doomed to extinction." Was this Inslee in 2019? No. This was Albert Rossellini in 1963.
Thank you very much, Larry. Tish, has anyone else signed up this evening?
Yes, Elizabeth Maupin.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Maupin. I live at 100 Big Bear Place, Northwest in Issaquah. And tonight I'm here representing the East Side Interfaith Social Concerns Council, which is partnering with ARCH and some other partners to put on a workshop for faith communities and municipalities across East King County. On October 12th, we'll be gathering, hearing stories of successful affordable housing built by faith communities or through their partners on their land, and also hearing some stories of faith communities who tried to do affordable housing and ran into some kind of roadblock. And we would love to have as many of you electeds and people from the public and faith community members as would like to come to this workshop. We'll start at 9 a.m. on October 12th at St. Luke's Lutheran Church on Bellevue Way. ARCH has done a lot in this area, and I was glad to hear the update. I hope that you have a chance to meet Lindsay Masters, who's the new Arthur. And I just think there's so much more that we really need to do on affordable housing. I hope that people will find some new innovative ideas, and we will have someone there who will address the legislative changes that have opened some possibilities. So if you want to learn more about the legislative changes, what the faith community is doing, and meet with legislators from across East King County and maybe come up with some really great ideas of yours that you can share with us, we would love to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Tish, is there anyone else who has signed up?
No.
Is there anyone else that would like to address council this evening? Not seeing any hands. Second call. Anyone else who would like to address council this evening? And a last call for audience comments. Thank you all for coming this evening. And to our two speakers for talking about two very important issues, the 40-million-year history of salmon in our area and our need for partnerships for affordable housing. Thank you for coming this evening. The next item on the agenda is committee and regional reports, and we will start with Councilmember Walsh.
No report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 reports this evening. The first one is from the WIRA 8 Water Resource Inventory Area 8 Salmon Recovery Council. The Salmon Recovery Council met on July 18th, and we approved the 2020 WIRA 8 budget and work plan, and we also approved our 2020 legislative priorities. We also had a presentation from the King County Conservation Futures Tax and Parks Levy grant recommendations about the work that they will do with the funds from that tax and Parks Levy grant. And then my second regional report is from the Cascade Water Alliance Board. Cascade Water Alliance Board met on July 24th, and we had an action item to approve the resolution authorizing additional utility services related to wastewater. This is an item that has been discussed at Good of the Order a few times by Mayor Pauley. So we did approve that, and it was unanimous. And this has to do with wastewater, sewage, septic collection with limitations on activities and authorization to charge for such services on behalf of the Cascade Water Alliance or cities that are members of Cascade Water Alliance. And then we also authorized a contract for Lake Tap's water quality monitoring services. And my last committee report is that the Council Land and Shore Committee met on August 1st, and we had 2 items. The first one is AB 7822, Amendment to Issaquah Municipal Code 12.05 related to sidewalk use district. And this is on our consent agenda for this evening, and the Land and Shore Committee recommended unanimously that it be approved. And our second item was single-family neighborhood framework. This was a discussion item, and we discussed the reasons why we might consider changing some of the uses in the single-family neighborhood zone, and this will be coming back to council at a future date in the work session format. So next we will see this, we will all see it together. And this was the last meeting of the Council Land and Shore Committee, so that remaining item will next be seen at the full council in a work session. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Ray?
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. The Services and Safety Committee will be meeting on August 13th at 6:30 here in council chambers. At this time, we have a single agenda item. The preliminary agenda will include Agenda Bill 7790, mitigation impact fees for transportation, fire, police, bike/ped, and general government buildings. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you. The Council Infrastructure Committee did not meet in July, and we're not likely to meet in August. The Growth Management Policy Board did not meet in August, and our next scheduled meeting is planned for the first Thursday in September. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Winterstein. Councilmember Goodman?
No report.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Batiste?
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Mertz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Sound Cities Public Issues Committee will not be meeting in the month of August because many organizations slow down in August, not us. But I have just forwarded on to my fellow council members a draft Vision 2050 SCA Statement of Guiding Principles, which just came out on Friday. I would ask that my fellow council members take a look at it, and that at our next council meeting for the good of the order, I will ask for feedback that I can share. It's unfortunate, SCA was saying if we wanted written feedback to go into the packet for the September 11th meeting, that they would want it by about a week from now, but it doesn't. Don't worry about that. It's fine, and most cities, I believe, will be providing their feedback as part of the September 11th meeting to go towards possible direction by the SCA board to be taken between then and when feedback is due, which is about 2 weeks after that. So please take a look, and I will be asking about it at the next for good of the order. Related topic, Growth Management Policy Council met on July 24th. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but a Vision 2050 public review draft, there was a general letter of principles that came out from GMPC. We did not take a position on it as an SCA caucus because SCA hadn't taken a position, but I believe that the principles that were in there were all in alignment with what we as a city have been pushing for, so I did not oppose the effort to do that. But the county will be getting more formal feedback from SCA next month. With that slightly confusing report, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President Martz. For the mayor's report this evening, I have a couple of items. Earlier this evening at 6:30 p.m., an executive session was held to discuss collective bargaining per RCW 42.30.140(4)(a). Action will be taken under tonight's consent calendar. There will be another executive session this evening to discuss applicant for public employee per RCW 42.30.110(1)(g). This item is expected to last 15 minutes, and no action is anticipated to follow an open session. I did want to provide a city administrator recruitment update. As you all know, City Administrator Moon will be having her last day in the office with us on Wednesday, this Wednesday, August 7th. And I've been managing a recruitment process through these last few months to find our next city administrator. Tonight, I would like to provide the council and our community with an update. On July 25th, we invited 2 finalists, Wally Bobkowitz and Marty Wine, to the city to attend staff and public forums. I will be posting a summary of all the feedback I got from that event and want to let all of those that participated, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the time that everyone took to engage and the very thoughtful comments that I received. I'm still continuing on my due diligence work for this hire, and I will be bringing council up to date on what I'm learning and hopeful to have an appointment for council consideration of confirmation in the next few weeks. And that is it for the mayor's report. Moving on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance, and if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved in one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
Yes.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we adopt the consent calendar as listed in tonight's meeting agenda.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. We have several items under regular business this evening. The first is AB 7287, City Council Rules of Procedure, and the action for this evening would be to adopt the ordinance and approve the resolution. This item was considered by the Council Ad Hoc Committee and was last discussed by the full council at the July 23rd Council Committee of the Whole. We'll have City Clerk Tina Eggers make a presentation this evening.
Hi, thank you. Happy to be back. Just to give you a reminder of where we've been. So you've been working on your rules of procedure this year, and you referred it on to Ad Hoc. Ad Hoc has done its work. We returned at the COW meeting of July 23rd, and we are at the finish line. Most recent direction that was provided at the COW meeting was to have Section 4.09 committee regional reports reflect current practice, and that study sessions that are housed under Section 5.04 include a rotating council member to serve as chair, providing a presiding officer, that schedule of the rotating council member would be developed by the city clerk and confirmed by the council president. There was some language requested for clarifying the chair's role, and standing meetings for study sessions were identified to be the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. Those changes were formalized in the final document that's in your packet and is ready for adoption. There's 2 items for action that are being sought this evening. The approval of a resolution adopts the rules of procedure, and the adoption of the ordinance repeals a chapter within the IMC and then amends Chapter 2.06 of the IMC. Adoption would then have the study session model be effective September 1. The goal remains the same, that it's a consistent legislative process, and these are items that were flagged earlier this year by you to be transparent, credible, participatory, efficient, and compliant. With that, it provides for maximized council touch points with all 7 council members, a streamlined legislative process, clear and consistent public input opportunities, improved timing for the work items, and flexibility, and effective use of staff and council resources. The format for this model is similar to your work sessions. Council would be seated on the floor at tables with staff. It would be limited to mid and high-level policy items. You would see them in your packet with ID memos. This provides for discussion and direction, opportunity for public input, and rotating council member to serve as chair. When I look at a proposed schedule for that rotating council member, 2019 through December, this would be a model that would work well. We're also looking to align it so that the leadership meeting that occurs the week before is also assigned to that person who would be chairing. There are some modifications to the leadership schedule that would need to occur, and of course, as a clerk, I wanted to make those in the footnote noted so that if you approve the rules of procedure this evening, that I've got a schedule to move forward with. And then what we're doing internally in order to move the study session deployment ahead. So you've seen us make some changes to the planning calendar, and we've done some low, mid, and high categories. We've also pivoted so that more items are on your consent, that there are less referrals. And then as we look at sort of the four internal categories, sort of the stages of various work plan items, when we're informing, we will be doing that under council meetings, under informational updates. You may see that through emails or through web links. When you're shaping or reviewing, those items that are mid to high would be occurring at study sessions, and occasionally, to allow for some flexibility, you might see that at an ad hoc or some of that reviewing and shaping at a council meeting. Ultimately, any action that you take would occur at a council meeting. So again, as we are deploying this internally, we are refining our tools and templates. We're working on a standard staff report. We're providing some presentation templates. We're offering some initial training to staff that's actually scheduled for August 26th, and then we'll package up some additional training as we move forward. Other enhancements and next steps, you'll see that our agenda starting in September would have public input identified on the agendas, and our agendas will also offer a link back to communicate with council to submit their feedback to you. Website calendar enhancements that we're looking for when we launch the website will be agenda topics will be included on our calendar once published. We'll have an engagement landing page. We'll, of course, continue to review, monitor, and adjust, and we will be returning to you in the summer to have a check-in meeting on this transition. Tonight's action would be to approve the resolution and adopt an ordinance unless you had questions or desired further amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Questions? Oh, come on, we've worked on this for years. There's got to be questions. Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
You outlined a number of the reasons that we're switching to the study session format from the committees, and so I wondered, what does the timeline look like for council to have the possibility of revisiting those and seeing how we're doing in terms of making those changes and achieving those goals or not?
So that would be our summer check-in with you, unless there was a direction to provide that at a different time.
Okay. I'm just interested in making sure that we do have that check-in and revisit and that it's deliberate.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein and Councilmember Walsh.
Tina, I appreciate some of the enhancements that I heard tonight, I think for the first time, especially having the agenda items, topics actually on the calendar, and making it much easier for somebody with a single click to perhaps engage and send us a message. Those are very nice improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. So we've heard from some community members that they might not understand what this change means for them and their ability to interact with council. And so I'm wondering so obviously the website relaunch is later, and so we need to look at what's happening now. How will we communicate that, particularly on the website or maybe in other mediums, to let people know that if they want to follow something from the early stages of development, when they should come in and interact?
Certainly. We're already finding that it's easier to communicate that information. We're doing it by phone, we're doing it through email, and we're doing it on the landing pages of our major project pages. So we have a water page that talks about fluoride. I chatted with communications staff, and they said this was so much easier to be able to articulate council's touch points under this new process than previous. So some of those things are already underway, and we expect that to continue. We will modify our calendar as quickly as we can after adoption. Some things needed action to be taken before we could go implement. So far, what we're finding is we're on track to inform the public, and we'll continue to do that.
Councilmember Ray.
So a little bit of a different tact. One of the things that we've done for a long time with the Infrastructure Committee was to receive updates from Public Works on major initiatives going on within the city. And then just this year, thank you, Jeff Watling, we started doing something similar within Services and Safety around parks and other non-Public Works related projects. Where do we envision those updates would occur in the new model?
Under the new model, you have an informational updates section that would be added to your council meetings. You saw a couple this evening under special business, so it would have a dedicated slot on your agenda for that. So we're going to see how that works and how you like that. Another avenue would be through email. And you have seen some of those informational type reports come out, say, from the police chief on crime stats. And I think engineering had a couple updates for you too by email. So we would continue to do those.
Thanks.
And can I probe your question a little bit? I think what you're getting at is that those were extremely useful to council because it was a broad list of all projects going on, and that the public also got the opportunity to hear it. So we need to find a way to fit that in so that you are feeling like we're getting the same sort of touch.
And I think it was an opportunity to have a discussion about the projects in a very high-level sense, but I think mostly it was an opportunity for the public to have visibility into those in a public forum, and that's really important to me that we maintain that in some fashion. So I prefer the updates to the emails because those tend to be limited in audience, so as we move forward, that would be my preference.
Okay, I hear you. That's a great point. Councilmember Winterstein.
I was going to make a motion.
Let me do a quick check-in. Is there anyone who hasn't commented that would like to make a comment? Otherwise, we're going to go to a motion. Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein.
I move that we approve resolution number 2019-10, adopting City Council Rules of Procedure, and adopt ordinance number 2874, repealing Chapter 2.04, council meetings, and amending Chapter 2.06 of the Issaquah Municipal Code, including retitling Chapter 2.06.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further council discussion? Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I didn't have a question earlier, but just this has been a long road and a lot of really, I think a lot of really great thought process around how we're going to move forward. I am interested to experience what it'll be like to have the study sessions and also the rotating chairs and just see how that works out. But it's a lot of hard work, and I'm glad to see it.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
Just in summary, it is difficult to change what's been institutionalized for perhaps decades, and that has had our specialized council committees, and now folding them into one committee of the whole, where now, as you said earlier, and thank you, Tina, for your report, all 7 of us get to be part of the formation of all significant policy matters for us to decide. So I think it's a step for the council and for the city. I think it helps quite a bit. We've seen quite a bit. You showed it here tonight, Tina, as well, that Mayor Paula, you and your staff are clearly preparing for this. That gives me a lot more confidence. I know that you have been rolling some of these new practices out. That's exactly, I think, what it takes to make something new like this type of institutional change, successful long-term. So I appreciate very much the preparation work and the way that you've kept us all informed. I am optimistic because there are many models of many cities all around us that are very successful at completing their legislative agenda using study sessions as we are now. So thanks to you, Tina, and the members of your staff and who've all have shepherded this through tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Council President Mertz.
I'll be supporting this evening. I will be watching to see how it works out. I think that the committee structure in the 9.5 years that I've been part of it, I've seen tremendous work come out of Land and Shore and Services and Safety and Infrastructure. And we have built at times a reservoir of talent in those committees. And gone into a depth, and I think an example of this, one of the finest hours was Services and Safety in addressing the senior center when things were at their worst, and it allowed us to have just many hours of committee meetings to first address community concerns and then to shape a new policy. So I'm enthusiastic to see how this new system works, and my hope is that we will continue to be able to provide the same level of rigor and depth to our consultative activities going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Mertz. Anyone else would like to make comments? Thank you all. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving resolution number 2019-10, adopting City Council rules of procedure, and adopt ordinance number 2874, repealing Chapter 2.04, council meetings, and amending Chapter 2.06 of the Issaquah Municipal Code, including retitling Chapter 2.06, has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. I also want to extend a real note of appreciation to council. This is something I have heard about for the 7 years that I've been serving the city, and it is a big, heavy lift with a lot of difficult questions and a bit of courage to try things out to see if you get the outcomes that you all desire. So I think it's a great best practice, and I think you now have the opportunity to continue to monitor and decide on its effectiveness and adopt your rules annually, and I think that's awesome, or biannually. Can't remember the exact frequency, but I think it's really great, and I'm very proud of the team and all of the work that you have done. Thank you very much for doing that. Next project under regular business is AB 7804, Confluence Park Turf and Irrigation Project. Council will be considering awarding the bid and allocating the funding. This is the first time that this item has been before council, and I'd like to ask Parks Director Jeff Watling to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Jeff Watling, Parks and Recreation Director. Seeking this bid award tonight for this work to be completed at Confluence Park. This is a maintenance project that seeks to install irrigation and improve the existing lawn areas within the park. As planned through the master plan of Confluence Park, that park had always been envisioned and has been envisioned to support a variety of active and passive recreational uses on those lawn areas. The current condition of relatively patchy grass, uneven, bumpy ground doesn't necessarily support that variety of use. Those variety of uses are anything from scheduled community events to unscheduled family picnics. The city sought and was awarded a state grant through the Department of Commerce, $200,000 to help fund this work. That was awarded last year. Given the bid market, the rising costs of landscape work, we created multiple bid schedules or bid alternates to provide us with some increasing flexibility based on that available budget and as the bids came in. Bids were opened middle of last month on July 18th. 2 bids were received. Green Slate Landscaping being the apparent low bidder. Given their bid prices that they provided and the project budget, staff is recommending that we award the base bid of this work and bid alternate or Schedule D of the work. What Schedule D is would be utilizing sod for some of the areas nearest the picnic shelter, some of those high-use areas. With the inclusion of a recommended 10% contingency, those two, the base bid, contingency, and Schedule D would bring the project cost to just over $490,000. Looking at what funds we have available within that project budget, that's a gap of approximately $165,000. To fully fund this work, Parks, Finance, and Administration recommend that $170,000 of already budgeted 2019 Parks capital dollars be reallocated from the 2019 East Sunset Way Trailhead project. As you recall, with the East Sunset Trailhead project, this 2019 work for that project was completed, and it was completed through an innovative partnership with the State Department of Natural Resources, DNR. Through that partnership, this critical acquisition that completed that connection from the trailhead up onto West Tiger was completed with the city contributing only $282,000 for that work, far less than what we anticipated had we have done that acquisition on our own. The planned trailhead enhancements are being designed currently, and we're partnering with DNR and Washington Trails Association on that work. That work will be completed this fall with DNR funds through that partnership. So all of that to say, within that project, there's a remaining $198,000 budgeted for the East Sunset Trailhead that's now unobligated. So again, it's our recommendation to take $170,000 of that and reallocate that to the Confluence Turf and Irrigation project. This in turn would complete both of these critical high-priority projects, East Sunset Trailhead acquisition and the Confluence Turf project to be completed this year. I would note, really in alignment with the Park Strategic Plan, both of these projects really seek to complete one of the highest priorities of the Park Strategic Plan, and that is to improve the performance of our existing city park spaces. Work schedule, what we anticipate is to begin this work the week of August 26th, so the tail end of August, looking to complete the work around middle of October. Jennifer Fink with the Park Planning Group will be project manager on this work, and with that, I recommend that we award the bid, and as outlined in the agenda bill. It's the end of the staff report.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions? Councilmember Winterstein, followed by Councilmember Hunt.
Couple questions. Jeff, that schedule you just outlined, I know there's going to be a number of events at the park this summer. I'm assuming there's no conflict?
There's not. We've worked very closely with Downtown Issaquah Association and their Confluence Jazz, Confluence Blues event. That is Sunday, August 25th.
Okay, good timing. Then, I'm real visual when it comes to things. In our packet, we have a map, and it's kind of, took me a while to figure out that was sod, the word sod, in some funny looking brackets. Right. But what I don't have in the information in front of me is much information beyond what you just said and the words in the packet about what's in the base bid. It says turf improvements and irrigation system installation in the Tully Anderson Homestead and Sybil Madeline Green, extension of plumbing for installation of a new drinking fountain, bark around trees, and hydro seed. What's unclear to me, what do you mean by turf improvements? And let me back up just a second. Completely aware, when it was bare dirt before it was hydroseeded the first time, right where that's actually the word sod.
I know, yeah.
S-O-D,
Sorry.
and
yeah.
with some brackets on each side, I think that's the case.
Correct.
Before that was hydroseeded, before a lot of it was seeded, I mean, it was very clear. The ground was very bumpy, very rocky. I thought, what are we doing? And so it's unfortunate we haven't having to go back and do that, but I know for a fact as a user and saw what happened when it was put in, the condition of that is substandard. Again, it's very unfortunate. So when it says turf improvements, can you give us with words and perhaps pointing on this map what we're talking about doing?
Yes, absolutely. And I will make a first effort at this and have Jennifer Fink come up if the questions get a little more technical. This green area identifies the scope of the project. And so along with adding irrigation, we will be removing that top layer of grass and organics, replacing with some topsoil and creating a far more usable lawn space. The end result would look very much similar, more similar to, say, the community lawn in front of the community center.
Okay, and it's just, okay, so that's all of it. I think that's just about everything, isn't it? Except where you have sod, that's the entire green space.
Primarily, there are some spaces.
There's trees there, yeah.
Trees, there are some spaces on the other side of these trail areas that would remain sort of that more natural or existing turf.
Okay, and it's not any, and where will the irrigation go?
All of this lawn area would be irrigated, the green area identified.
Okay. Okay, all of it, okay, all right. And then I have a couple questions about the southeast, the other project. Let me look at my notes, not southeast.
Oh, East Sunset Trailhead?
Yeah, the East Sunset Trailhead project. And I did send you an email earlier, and I did get your response. I was wondering about, and I don't know if we've had, and the fact that it's this far, and you said it yourself, we had, I don't know, Mary Lou, if you saw my email, or Emily, you saw it in Jeff's response. So my question was, because we have in the 2019 budget, we explicitly have a line item for Parks Capital for 480, and for that southeast Sunset Trailhead. And so maybe I'm learning something about the budgeting process right now, but it was like, I'm not sure where the boundaries are, and it's apparently not, you're telling me it's not at the project level, because this packet does not include a budget amendment to take money from that project and move it to this one. Emily, you're nodding your head. Could you just say a few words of clarification for me?
Sure. Council has authority to set the appropriation limit for the fund. You've authorized both of those capital projects, yes, with a particular budget, but you've given the city the budgetary authority within the capital fund for that whole amount. And so we're providing notice that our intent is to move between those two projects. And through taking this action tonight, you're signaling that is okay. So we don't need a separate motion to actually make the transfer of funds or to change an appropriation, because you approve at the fund level.
Okay, so we did the appropriation of those type of funds in the budget, and it's just now moving between projects. And then my last question is, Jeff, you talked about the improvements, and it even says in the packet, improvements are being addressed through DNR funding. You mentioned a little bit about this. So we partnered with them to acquire the land. Now there's improvements, and just they are paying for all of them. So there's not going to be any other improvements planned for that project, even though it has nothing to do with Confluence, but the monies are kind of tied together. There's nothing else planned that we foresee. They're going to complete all the improvements in Southeast Sunset Trailhead.
Within the 2019 sort of plan priorities for East Sunset Trailhead, yes, that would complete that work. And what we're anticipating, what you'll see, notice we're doing this fall, is designing some safer and actually separated trails coming from the parking lot, the East Sunset Trailhead parking lot, traversing up the hill. We're looking at designing and installing a separated bike trail and a separated pedestrian trail to create a much safer experience coming out of that trailhead. So that'll be completed with DNR funding in a partnership with us. Washington Trails Association is another party that's partnering with us on the design work for that.
Okay, and just the numbers, as I've worked them out, it was originally 480 for that one. We spent 280 on the land, you said, leaving a balance of 200. We'd be shifting 170 over to Confluence. So there's still 30,000 of unobligated funds.
Correct.
Between these two projects. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Hunt next.
So you mentioned that in the Parks Plan, one of the core principles is taking care of the parks assets that we have. And so to that end, I'm interested in getting a better handle on maintenance and maintenance costs and the schedules. And so I wondered if you could talk about, for our future planning, when we would expect to need to put in new sod again or take care of the lawn and see new needed maintenance on the irrigation that's going in or the grass and the improvements that are being put in.
Like any grass area, we'd be mowing it. So we're currently mowing it. We wouldn't anticipate needing to replace the sod. We do anticipate when you irrigate, there's an additional cost for water. That's been rolled in and will be identified within our 2020 budget request within the utilities budget as we've been preparing those requests to the mayor.
How long do we expect the improvements to last? Do they last for?
Sure. Great question. In terms of the infrastructure, we're talking about irrigation and controls. This would be a 20 to 30 year or longer irrigation system that we'd be putting in. So, yeah, long life.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you. So I just have one clarifying question. So the map up there, Paul was talking about the parentheses and sod. So it's a little bit confusing. I just want to clarify. So it looks like there's a black line that's drawn right above the words sod. And so if we don't talk about it, it almost looks like only the sod is going in below that black line.
Correct. So the base bid assumed all of this would be hydroseeded in. And so what you're seeing from that black line, and I'm sorry it's not specific enough, everything south of that black line will be sod. So that's bid alternate D.
Okay.
The rest of it would be hydroseeded in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Question. Any other questions? Is anybody prepared to make a motion? Council President, Councilmember Winterstein, question.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the last thing. Jeff, given the math I just shared with you, why didn't you consider any of these other schedules, A, B, or even C? I mean, I see the numbers in the packet, the engineer's estimates and what they came in at, but did you give any consideration?
We did. Given the base bid and the significant increase that those proposals came in at, given our balancing many priorities and limited funding that we have with the city, we felt that the combination of the base bid and Schedule D really focused on the highest and top priority for this project, and that was focusing on irrigating and increasing functionality of the lawn areas. Some of those other bid alternates from lighting, I think the other one is concrete curb. Edging would be nice to have, but added a significant cost and did not feel like adding any of those would necessarily, we would be able to just reallocate funding already budgeted within the 2019 capital budget. To do that, we would need to be seeking additional funding.
Yes, and Schedule C, and people don't have the benefit that I have from looking at it, covered installation of a conduit system to allow for additional path lights to be installed, extending the existing system to Rainier Trail and Margaret's Meadow parking lot. So that light, there's lots of dark hours around here. Lighting is good. Mm-hmm. And it seems just within the budget that we were working with, the available funds, those improvements could have been covered with our available funds.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before looking for a motion? Council President Martz.
Madam Mayor, I move to award the construction contract for the base bid in Schedule D to Green Slate Landscaping Incorporated in the amount of $451,562.01, including sales tax, and authorize the allocation of $170,000 in budgeted capital funds, $30,000 in King County Parks levy funds, and $140,000 in park mitigation funds for the construction of the Confluence Park Turf and Irrigation Improvement Project.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next item on our regular business agenda is AB 7805, the 2019 Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan. The request of council this evening is to adopt the ordinance. Council has received an informational presentation on this item at the October 2018 work session, and I'd like to ask Resource Conservation Coordinator Micah Bonkowski to make a presentation. Actually, I'm just going to add something in. This is King County's Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan, not the City of Issaquah's, just in case that wasn't clear.
Hello, council members, residents. Micah Bonkowski with the Office of Sustainability. Thanks for having me here tonight. Tonight, King County Solid Waste Division Director Pat McLaughlin will be presenting to you on the final 2019 King County Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan, and you are being asked to adopt the plan as the city plan. First off, I want to thank the county staff that are here tonight and all the others that have been working to bring this final plan together for the last more than a decade. The city has been a part of all the discussions and drafts that have gone forward along the way through participation in the Municipal Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee and through other forums like the Sound Cities Association Public Interest Committee and others. Before Director McLaughlin begins, I wanted to briefly go over some of the more recent background of the process of moving this plan forward toward adoption. Some of this will be covered in the King County presentation as well. So the city, along with 37 other cities in King County, is part of an interlocal agreement that was extended and amended in 2013 and runs through 2040. The extension allowed King County to issue longer-term bonds at more favorable rates for capital improvements, such as transfer station improvements and facility updates, and this also allows for better planning for post-landfill closure options. As part of this interlocal agreement, the city directs all of its garbage tonnage to the King County regional system. The recycling and composting that are part of our solid waste system are dealt with separately in our solid waste contract. The last comprehensive plan adoption was in 2001, and the city, again, has had an advisory role in the drafting process of this plan since about 6 years after that plan ended. The 2018 draft and the environmental impact statement for the 2019 plan had a thorough public input period, including an open house at the King County Public Library Services Center in February of 2018. And the administration took part in the public comment process by expressing concern that the plan listed 3 future disposal options, but did not select one of those disposal options as the preferred alternative, despite what we felt was expansion at Cedar Hills being the most viable and cost-effective and lowest carbon footprint near-term option for disposal. The comments also reaffirmed the importance of maintaining the 70% recycling rate goal that the county had had in previous plans. Both comments have been addressed in this final plan, and Director McLaughlin will address them in his presentation. Council received a presentation from King County last October 23rd, and the plan was adopted with some changes by the King County Council on April 24th of 2019. Cities have until September 16th to act, which is 120 days from receipt of the final draft, after which the Department of Ecology has 45 days to finalize the adoption of the plan for King County. In order for the plan to take effect, per the interlocal agreement, cities representing 75% of the population must act in the affirmative. Issaquah represents 3% of the population of those interlocal cities. With these cities already adopting the plan and adoption pending in the second column of cities, the adoption is at 74.6%, and it may have changed since I last got this information, but probably close. And with Issaquah representing 3%, an affirmative adoption vote would push it over the line, as it were, making adoption kind of imminent. The options tonight that are going to be discussed are adopt the ordinance. In 2001, the city adopted the Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan by ordinance. For this reason, it will take an ordinance to repeal the previous adopted plan and adopt the 2019 plan as the City Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan. If the city adopts the plan, we're committing to making a reasonable, good faith effort to implement the policies, goals, and actions that are in the plan. However, there are no specific legal requirements or other penalties if Issaquah is unable or unwilling to achieve any of the policies, goals, or actions in the plan. In the 2001 ordinance, the city also included language that's noted in your agenda bill, specified in RCW 70.95.160, that maintains the city's right to set service levels. While there are no mandates in the 2019 plan that would impact current city service levels, the administration felt it prudent to maintain this language in the 2019 adoption ordinance. The city has a history of using our service level setting to incentivize increased diversion, increased recycling, increased composting, and we'd like to keep that option open in the future. Another option would be the no action alternative. Council could choose to take no action at this time. If 75% of the cities affirm the plan, per the interlocal, it would still become the plan of the city and the county. One city, Duval, has chosen to do this so far. This would also be seen as a strong message to King County and other cities that Issaquah disagrees with one or more of the provisions in the plan, and it would be important to articulate these reasons to the county and cities. The city would continue to use the system and operate by the interlocal agreement. Another option would be to vote down adoption of the plan, and that would be seen as an even stronger message of disagreement and would have similar results, i.e. if 75% of the population voted the plan in, it would still become the acting plan of the city. Again, it would also require discussions with the county and other cities about the points that the city disagrees with in the plan. If there's any questions now, I can take them, but I'd recommend we turn it over to Director McLaughlin, and he can maybe answer some of them in his presentation. Yes, Councilmember Martz.
I just had a question about something that you said. You referenced Sound Cities Association? I'm sorry, what was Sound Cities? I don't believe Sound Cities Association has taken a position on this.
They haven't taken a position, but parts of the comprehensive plan drafts over the last decade have been discussed at Sound Cities in the past.
Okay, I just want to make very, very clear that Sound Cities has been updated on this subject over the course of the last year, but has not taken a position on it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Micah, or would we like to bring up the King County Council reps now and have them talk? Okay, it looks like we're bringing King County on. Thank you, Micah. But you can't go anywhere because they may have city questions as well. Thank you.
Get started at the back. There we go.
Excellent. Good evening. For the record, my name is Pat McLaughlin. It's my honor to serve as King County's Director of Solid Waste, and I appreciate the opportunity to be before your council this evening and talk about a body of work that's been underway for several years, actually. Our comprehensive plan guides the framework for our long-range planning. It's intended to look out 6 to 20 years and help us make big decisions to reach important destinations, and yet we find ourselves relying on a plan that was developed back in 2001. And as it turns out, we are at an intersection in our regional system where we have some very significant decisions to be made and recognize that we need modern, updated policy framework to inform those decisions. And so for the last few years, we've been working extensively with our regional partners, which includes both, of course, our cities as well as our haulers and other interested partners in this regional area, to help inform what those policy boundaries should be. And it's really reflected here in the presentation I'm going to talk about tonight. Just by way of brief background, our regional system is really quite large, one of the largest in the U.S., actually, just given the size of King County. It covers over 2,000 square miles and serves not just 37 cities, but of course the unincorporated areas of King County as well. And that represents in total over 1.5 million residents, and last year almost 1 million tons of garbage. So there's a lot of material to be managed. The good news is there's more recyclables that are generated in this region than garbage. But nonetheless, we do have to manage that waste in a responsible way, both environmentally and fiscally, and that's what we want to talk about tonight. Although the plan is quite broad in terms of the material it covers, this evening I suggest we at least begin a focus in 3 key areas, and I'm happy to go beyond these areas, but the areas of disposal, transfer, and recycling really represent where some of the most critical decision points that we're facing in our region and represent significant updates within the plan itself. Beginning with disposal. One of the fundamental responsibilities the county has in the relationship that Micah had mentioned, we have interlocal agreements with the city of Issaquah. And the fundamental responsibility we have is to transfer and manage that waste and dispose of it in an environmentally and fiscally responsible way. And for over 50 years, we've been doing that locally at the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, and yet we're finding now that we're reaching the end of the road. We opened our last cell, as it currently stands, what we call Area 8, just about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, started putting waste in it. That cell will last until about 2025. We can go back over a couple of the older cells at the landfill, gain a couple more years, but essentially, that's the end of the road for the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, unless we build additional capacity. And we looked at different options, adding what would be a final cell. We also looked at the alternatives of waste export and waste to energy, which, by the way, both work. And we couldn't always say that, but of course, waste export has been a chosen solution for the city of Seattle, who runs their own waste management program. County of Snohomish does a similar approach. There are some constraints on the railways. There is an additional expense to move that waste a few hundred miles away, but it does work. Waste to energy similarly works. It's been proven even in the more recent years through successful demonstration projects and full-scale operations such as in West Palm Beach, Florida, but at a significant expense. And so what was not reflected, as Micah correctly pointed out, and as even your city pointed out in its comments, in a draft version of this comprehensive plan, a choice between waste export, waste to energy, and Cedar Hills was not made until this final plan. And in the final plan, after acknowledging both the environmental, the financial, and the overall risk elements associated with each of those 3 disposal choices, we have identified that maximizing the remaining capacity at Cedar Hills is in the best interest of our regional system. It allows us to continue to manage our waste locally. We can do so at the least financial cost to our ratepayers. It has the least environmental impacts as well, particularly as we measure greenhouse gas emissions. And I think this is equally important, it provides us an adequate runway to plan for what's next. Because in order to build this final cell, and it's a little hard to see here on this particular picture, my apologies for that, but in the upper right corner of this image, which is the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, are buildings. Those buildings are on prime real estate in terms of where garbage could go. And so this plan calls for those buildings to be relocated elsewhere on the property so that we could design and build what we would call Area 9. And Area 9 could be sufficient based on our forecast to provide local disposal capacity through about 2040. There's a lot of variables that come into play, both economically, recycling-wise, and other, but for planning purposes, till about 2040. What that also does is give us a planning runway, because that will be the final cell. The boundaries of Cedar Hills are finite. There are no other locations to be developed. All the green space that you see is representative of closed landfill cells. And so we really can't go anywhere else, and we're going to need another disposal alternative. So we have to continue to evaluate waste to energy, waste export, or any other evolving and emerging technology that may come about in the years to come. So the other thing that this plan calls for is to keep planning. While we believe the sound approach is to develop this final cell to ensure no gap in capacity, especially since we're less than 10 years away from running out of capacity, we don't have time to waste. So we have to keep planning, though, because I think the worst thing that could happen is that we do run out of time and have to remove options from the table because we don't have enough time to implement them. And this cell, in addition to the financial and environmental benefits, gives us that planning runway. So whatever the region selects as the next disposal option, will have a viable ability to actually implement it. And so that is the first significant policy choice represented in this plan. The second is around transfer. Again, a fundamental role that we play is providing your regional haulers a convenient and logistically sound place for them to unload their collection vehicles and get back out and complete their routes. And we've done a significant effort over the past several years in modernizing these transfer stations. We're in the process of designing a new replacement station for our 1960s era facility in Algona. We most recently opened our Factoria station. That's what's pictured on your screen here. When we upgrade these facilities, and we're almost done doing that, there are several significant benefits that come to play. One is much better service levels for the customers. We can get them in and out safer and faster. We can offer a more expansive service arrangement. Here at Factoria, a very busy station, we didn't have any recycling options available to our customers until we opened this station. You imagine over 50 years of service and no recycling options available. Well, that's the same type of scenario we're faced in the Northeast, which is a very busy station as well. It's called our Houghton Station. It's hosted by the city of Kirkland. We have limited recycling. It's a 1960s era station, which really looks like a carport. It's an open air station, not enclosed like this facility is. The challenge with the older stations, it used to be we could barely get the collection vehicles in. We actually had to raise the roof at Houghton just to accommodate the larger vehicles. But it is more difficult to control noise, odor, and dust in an open air facility. You can imagine that. So we're not able to offer the wide range of services or the environmental mitigation that comes with a modern facility. Compaction of waste at the facility. At a station such as Factoria, we're able to compact and consolidate that waste into trailers, reducing the outbound traffic by a third. And that's a benefit not just to the environment, but to the local community in terms of transportation. So in Houghton, in the Kirkland, Redmond, and Woodinville service area, they're paying the same price everybody else is and yet getting substantially less. And one of the significant themes that we heard in our planning process for this comprehensive plan was we have to address the inequities of that part of our regional system. So this plan calls for the siting and replacement of the Houghton transfer station to address those inequities and to help ensure that we can continue to progress in our environmental and service goals. The third area that I want to touch on this evening is about our environmental goals and that with respect to recycling. You know, this region has a phenomenal track record in terms of recycling. I mentioned in my opening comments, nearly 1 million tons of garbage were disposed of last year, but nearly 1.3 million tons of recyclables were recovered and put back into the economy. That's a great, great achievement. Our recycling rates regionally across King County is about 54%. That's nearly twice that of the national average. And it's reflective of the commitment of the people who live in this fine region. But there's so much more we can do. And we have a vision and a plan that's reflected within this comprehensive plan to get our recycling rates to 70%. And within this plan is articulated the steps that would progressively allow all of our communities to get there. But the challenge is today, in a regional system that's comprised of 37 cities and in an unincorporated area, we have 38 different ways to recycle. So depending on where you live, work, and play, the recycling rules are different. And that's confusing. That confusion breeds contamination in the recycle stream. That contamination devalues those recyclable materials, often making them waste. So we need to remove that confusion. And the way to do that is to get on the same page, right? And have a standard way of recycling. And so the plan as written continues to provide cities the individual opportunity to select the recycling programs and techniques that they want. But the challenge is if we continue on that path, we probably won't rise much above our 54% recycling rate. So the county has accepted an action within this plan to work with the cities and its own unincorporated areas to harmonize our approaches to recycling. And we believe if we do that, we can reach a 70% recycling rate. And we can even look in the fine city of Issaquah to see, I've just got some stats here, your own single-family recycling rate is at 58%, which is very admirable, right? Multifamily is at 26%. Now, that's, of course, you know, half of what you're doing in single-family, but comparatively still a pretty good number, right? In this plan, we identify very specific actions that you can consider to drive both of those numbers up, along with the county and along with your sister cities. And so we're really encouraged by the work that's been underway to identify those strategies and bring us to the next level of recycling in King County. Micah covered this process pretty well, so I won't spend too much time on it. But this plan only gets adopted if our cities say it's a good plan. It's gone through our county council process. Even before that, it went through the regional policy committee here in King County, and it's now up to the cities. It's in their hands. We have had a very strong and favorable response rate. And although the plan doesn't require 100% response, it's certainly my personal hope that 100% of the cities would take action to support this plan and represent that it is consistent with their own vision for how we manage waste and recyclables in this region. We have until the 16th of September, and that's really dictated by our interlocal agreements. So we'll look at the cities who have opted to take action, and providing that those cities who have acted in support of the plan represent at least 75% of the population of those cities taking any action, then the plan will pass, and it's looking very positive that that's going to be the case. My hope tonight is that by being here, sharing this information and answering your forthcoming questions, that I can certainly inform your own decision and perhaps even persuade you to be a part of those supporting cities. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Pat. And before we go to questions, I just wanted to thank you for the tour that your group provided for Councilmember Hunt and myself earlier this year. We were able to go out to the facility with one of our local students who was shadowing for the day and get a look at more than just the pictures, actually seeing the operation. And it was a very good tour, and I would recommend it to any of our council members who are also interested in doing it, or other high school interns who are doing shadowing.
We would be happy to host that. We do over 85 tours a year. And I did neglect to say, and I know you know this, but I must say this, that, this has been a very transparent and engaging process with our cities. We learned a lot through our advisory committee, specifically our what we call our MSWAC advisory committee, which is comprised of the cities themselves, a very important part. We have 2 advisory committees. You are well represented and have been for as long as I've not been with the county that long in terms of county years, but as long as I've been there, Micah's been there, I think. Right? I think probably, and he's probably been there a lot longer. I just want you to know what you already do know. You have an amazing ambassador at the table. So as we have come forward in kind of full confidence in this plan, it's representative of the values and interests of your city, and it's been really an honor to work with Micah in that process. So thank you for letting him be a part of this process in such a important way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So council questions. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. So this is a huge plan, 403 pages.
Yeah.
Got through as much of it as I could, focusing on section 6, which talks about the disposal option for beyond 2028. And so this plan is not only looking at today forward through that horizon of 2028, but also selecting what we will choose after that point. And so my understanding from your presentation and reading over this plan is that then we're not just looking at continuing Cedar Hills through 2028, but also beyond that scope.
That's correct. This plan has a 20-year outlook, so it gets us to about 2040 in terms of disposal. And it also calls for us to continue the planning. Really, the comprehensive plans are meant to be at least reviewed every 6 years. So this calls, within the next 5 years after adoption, to produce an accompanying plan that will inform that kind of post-2040 option. But the choices that you've heard me talk about tonight of expanding capacity at Cedar Hills carries us to about 2040.
And so that is accomplished not only through the current, you said area 8, cell 8 is the one that you're newly expanding.
Yes.
It also includes moving the buildings and opening up area 9, which would take you through 2040. And then it also includes raising the ceiling on how high those existing cells can go, which it sounds like cells 1 through 4 can be raised from 800 feet to 833 feet?
No, you were right on the money up until when we think about the other cells, it's not feasible to go back and put more waste on the earliest cells 1 through, say, 4. Areas 5 and 6 can have a modest top lift, and we will do that in the kind of the 2026, 2027 period. Once area 8 fills, we'll go back to 5 and 6, and before we go to 9. So the only areas where we're going to put waste as we go forward is we're going to, there'll be a small top on 7, we'll fill 8, we'll go back to 5, 6, we'll do 9, and we might be able to go back to 7 and 8 a couple of times, but we'll just kind of stay in that range.
So rereading this section, it says you'll be able to develop new cells within the existing footprint of the landfill. So that's talking about cells 8 and 9.
It's really referring to 9.
Okay, and those will be permitted up to 830 feet tall, whereas the cells 5, 6, and 7, which were part of the settlement agreement, are capped at 788 feet. Is that correct?
You have read your plan well. Yes, ma'am.
I have, because
Yes.
there are a lot of community members that
Absolutely.
are very concerned over this idea.
Yeah, this plan specifically affirms the county's commitment to honor that settlement agreement, which limits the heights of 5, 6, and 7 to 788 feet. There are some possible exceptions that are noted within the settlement agreement itself, but effectively, we have planned to continue honoring that settlement agreement. We always have, and we don't have any intention, and we don't see any need to specifically violate that.
Anything else, Councilmember Walsh?
Not right now.
Okay. Deputy Council President Batiste?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation this evening. So it is my understanding that with the focus being continuing with the Cedar Hills landfill, that this is a planning time, and that you'll be looking at other options for the future, one of those being the waste to energy. I just had a question. It looks like there's a consultant contract that is scheduled for completion on waste to energy by October 2019. Just wondering about the timing, as the vote is coming in September, and this overview won't be done until October.
Correct. I can appreciate the confusion there. So we, in 2017, hired a consulting firm to study the feasibility of waste to energy and help inform even aspects of waste export to inform this plan. The study that's underway now is building upon that knowledge, because really what we learned in the 2017 study is waste to energy actually is a viable alternative. It does work, it's scalable, the technology is stabilized. But what we also learn is, well, a few things. One is it's very expensive. A fair amount of up to about 40 acres would be needed. It would be the largest plant in the world to handle King County's waste. And we also kind of wrestled with this, what about the remaining capacity of Cedar Hills? Should we maximize that? But we at least learned it's viable, right, and scalable. But it did not ultimately make sense to actually try and pursue it, because we didn't think we could have it in place by the time we needed it. So this current study that's underway, that will be done in October, is building upon that, because we do see waste export remaining as that viable alternative. And that may be the right solution to take us from 2040 and beyond. But we need to further, so we've asked this consulting firm to further inform what that would look like and how we would take it to those next steps. So what that study is going to do is inform this planning process that needs to continue over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And another question that I had, you talked about our differing recycling methods and plans around harmonizing those. Could you be a little more specific about what would actually be happening, and what is in play to actually start to focus on that?
Great question. So in the plan itself, you'll see a roadmap to 70%, and it's incremental steps that will take us from where we are to where we want to be. And in that roadmap, you'll also see how each of those specific actions, whether they're focused on the single-family sector, the multifamily sector, or even in the commercial sector, what percentage of gain in terms of recycling does each individual step get us? You'll see that there's no home runs. There's not one big thing, hey, we'll just do this and we'll get 15 or 20% gain. Nope. There's a lot of very small incremental gains that we can get. And examples would be the frequency of collection. Most commonly, we have weekly garbage collection and every other week recycling collection. However, most of what is being disposed of is actually recyclable. When I say most, as it turns out, about 70% of what is disposed of could be recycled. So if you flip your collection service and you did recycling every week and garbage every other week, you would actually see some of the most substantial gains. The city of Renton has recently done this and seen fairly substantial gains in their recycling rates. And that's an example of one of the steps that can be taken. There are other steps such as bans and mandates. You know, not exciting words to move forward on, but to actually ban certain materials from being put into the recycling carts, such as single-use bags and shredded paper and the sort, and getting those into other recycling channels. So there's bans and mandates, there's service changes that can be made, and a variety of programs like that. And again, none of them by themselves will make a substantial gain, but collectively they can move the needle.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilmember Hunt?
This may be a question for Micah. I'm wondering what the city is doing to make sure that people know how to recycle. It's something that I hear a lot about from members of the community, that it can be confusing, or that it's difficult to know what can be recycled or how to set out the recycling. And I know for me too, I learned not right when I moved to Issaquah, but later on, that you put the recyclables loose in the cart, for instance, and that they also don't like to have those loose plastic bags because they cause problems on the equipment at the recycling facilities. So I just wondered what we can do and what we're doing already to make sure that people understand what can be recycled for our area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple different campaigns going and have had for several years. As Pat noted, our multifamily recycling rate is only 24% versus our single family, which is around 60 now. And so we've been focusing the last couple of years a lot of attention on the multifamily properties, and we've had, I don't know off the top of my head how many properties have participated, but Recology has summer staff that go out and do door-to-door education at multifamily properties with the cooperation of the property manager. And those property managers are eligible for a discount on their service up to $150, which is helpful to them. And then the residents are supplied a tote bag so that they can take their loose recycling out and empty it rather than putting it in plastic bags. And on the tote bag is educational messaging on what can and can't be put in there. Right now, we're focusing a lot because of the contamination issues on pushing out the empty, clean, and dry message on most of the social media or other campaigns that we do in the city through the communications office. We've also been doing a lot of commercial outreach, especially to large property managed areas where there's not as much of an incentive for the commercial business owner to divert more because they're not paying the garbage bill. They pay a flat rate for their rental, and that includes garbage and recycling service. So we're trying to get past some of those barriers through just doing direct outreach and working with those businesses. We also have a really robust program in the Issaquah School District, and we work with them a lot on messaging and building up those little recyclers and little stewards who go home and tell their parents what to put where. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. They're really good at it. So those are just some examples of the programs that we're working on right now. And I will say, in terms of some of the mandates that Pat mentioned, our polystyrene packaging ban in the city did cause a bump in our commercial diversion rate just by increasing the amount of food waste that was being composted by restaurants in Issaquah. And we're still the only city in the King County system that has that ordinance. So other cities have asked about it several times, but nobody else has gotten it across the finish line. So that's another one of those potential options to get to 70%.
Additional questions for either Micah or Pat? Okay, thank you both. Do I have anyone interested in making a motion? Councilmember Ray.
Make a motion. Move to adopt ordinance number
2875.
adopting the final 2019 Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan prepared by King County as an update to the 2001 Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan adopted by ordinance number 2333.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there additional council discussion? Council President Martz?
So regretfully, I'm going to oppose this motion. I think that this is an extraordinarily complicated subject, and there are many ways to view what to do with the waste stream. And it's not obvious that taken as a whole, there's a clear answer in every situation, but I think you have to look hard at the fact that in Germany and Sweden and Norway and the Netherlands and Belgium, this has become the de facto standard for dealing with waste. And the reason that it has, I believe, is because one of the lenses we can view waste is around carbon generation. And I think that if you believe that global warming is the preeminent threat to civilization, I think you have to say that carbon generation is the lens through which these decisions have to be made. And in both the direct measurement, even if you capture, first of all, we're not capturing the methane that's coming out of landfills. Even if you capture the methane, the carbon difference between landfills and incineration is much better from a carbon standpoint. And so while there are challenges associated with incineration, and I agree that the King County has an extraordinary waste stream, I think that it's sensible to look at what other countries are doing, particularly countries that are more ecologically focused than ours, and they have been moving towards incineration. And actually, Councilmember Walsh kind of made the critical point for me, because I was fine with this as a stopgap measure, but looking at the report beyond 2028, I can't conscience the idea that we're going to take this off the table for another 20 years and stuff this waste down the throats of unincorporated King County for another 20 years. So I'm not willing to support that tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Martz. Other comments? Councilmember Walsh.
So I am also not supporting this, and I would encourage my other council members to please think about the message that we can send to King County. Looking at the idea of expanding the Cedar Hills landfill beyond the existing areas and adding, in fact, 2 areas and expanding the heights that we can go to, just in order to not have to look at these other very viable options, I think is a problem. And it's something that we, as one of the more local cities to this area, need to be very aware of. And so I'm not going to be supporting this tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Other council members? Councilmember Winterstein, followed by Councilmember Hunt.
Well, I'm hearing some real conflicting information, even in tonight's report, especially about heights, and even the verbal report we got this evening, how that there are permitted height requirements and that they're not going to violate those terms. So I'm confused about the claims about increased height. Also, I heard quite a bit about within the next 5 years taking another look at especially waste to energy, and that this is not a set in stone 20-year plan, do nothing again. So I actually heard testimony that directly conflicts with a couple comments I've heard up here in the day. So I'm a little bit confused about that. Confused on why there is such a conflict. So if anybody can clarify that for me, I'd appreciate it quite a bit. I do appreciate the report that we do have that's in the packet. I have the advantage, if you're not looking at it, within the packet, there is a report that begins, it's called the Planning for the Regional Future of Regional Waste Management. It's fairly comprehensive. It addressed water quality, air quality, odor control, bird management, other things. And actually it's very educational to me as well. I don't have the same lack of confidence that the alternatives weren't adequately considered. So I'll say that as a positive. I am confident that the alternatives were adequately considered and that there's a lot of different ways you have to make a complex decision about this. Sometimes it's a business decision, and I think there's a very key element. And I think you talk about carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. You talk about impact to the environment, and those factors have been weighed in this decision that's being the preferred option, and it's one that our mayor's office and the mayor wrote a letter in support of before a preferred alternative was selected by the county. I do agree with that because I wish our recycling rates were higher. I wish that the amount of disposal was less. And I think that's every one of us individually, including our households, that have to take some responsibility for those actions. But I don't have the same confusion that I've heard up here, and I'm going to be supporting the plan as presented.
Thank you, Councilmember Winterstein. Councilmember Hunt?
So I also feel that there's been some conflicting information or conflicting viewpoints brought up in this conversation, and so I wondered if we could get clarity, because we didn't talk very much in this presentation today about the comparison of carbon emissions or carbon footprint of the waste to energy versus the landfill, but I do recall in an earlier presentation seeing that table, and as I recall, it was preferred from that analysis that for the carbon footprint, it was preferred to expand landfill, at least at the time frame that we were being considered. So since there's some differences of opinion, I wondered if we could at least confirm that that was the information we've been presented with, is that it is the carbon, the preferred climate action or, climate change reducing method by the analysis that has been provided to us.
Thank you, Pat.
So the way we measure the environmental impacts of these choices is we look at what our regulatory models require of us. Our regulator is the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. They offer two models from which we can assess waste export, waste to energy, and landfilling. And in each of those cases, whether you use what's called the WARM model, which is really the best model for comparing, and its purpose is to compare disposal alternatives, the emissions associated with waste to energy are about 100 times that than landfilling. And the reason is because waste to energy, while it has benefits, you are creating energy, and that's good, right? You are incinerating waste. There is an incineration, a burn process, and an inevitable part of that is an emission of greenhouse gases, a significant emission. And so there is a specific table, and I regret I can't cite the page, but it's in Chapter 6 of the comprehensive plan, and it shows what those comparative numbers are. And whether you measure it under the WARM model or in our annual reporting tool, which both numbers are there, is a substantial emission disadvantage associated with waste to energy. And that's just because you're burning material.
So we'll get Micah to look that up. I
I
also,
can tell you the page.
oh, great,
It's
thanks.
page 162.
162, thank you.
In our packet, it's page 473 out of 496.
Thank you. I wanted to do two things here. I wanted to make sure that Councilmember Hunt got the full answer, but I also wanted to come back to Councilmember Winterstein at one point and get a little clarification on what exactly it is that you would like to phrase your question of what you think the conflicting information was, so that we could have King County and the city address that as well. Did you get a complete answer to your question?
I did. Councilmember Walsh also is showing me the table. So this is what I recall seeing earlier, which is, as was also stated, that the waste-to-energy facility does have the higher emissions, and that is what I recall, and that is still the information that's being presented to us, and I haven't seen contrary data anyway.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein, you had said
Well,
that...
I had seen the same data, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and just in the comments this evening, and it's in the packet this, as well, as far as the height, I mean, I've heard that there's a settlement, there's an agreement, and they're sticking within that. So I'm confused by hearing that we're going to go above that.
Pat, could you provide a little bit more information about the history of the height limits? And I think the information is being received in different ways. So it'd be great.
Thank you. We entered into a settlement, the county entered into a settlement agreement about 1999 with a few thousand neighbors around the landfill. One specific element, and I think a very important element of that settlement agreement, calls for a limitation of height. And when we talk about height, we're talking about height above sea level. And it says that the height of areas 5, 6, and 7 will not exceed 788 feet. It goes on to say that there may be some circumstances where that may not be possible. And setting that aside, right, I'm not changing what that says. There could be some circumstances where it's not possible. In all of our planning assumptions here, we have assumed that areas 5, 6, and 7 will remain at 788 feet. We have not assumed that those are going to go any higher than what the settlement agreement calls for. It's the reason we're able to get us additional capacity, whether or not we use it. By giving us capacity, it gives us the choice. Developing Area 9 could allow us to use it to 2040. It doesn't require us to use it, but it gives us that ability. So nothing in this plan prevents us as a region to implement another alternative before 2040 if we want to do that. Right? The region decides these choices, and they decide it through a rate process. Right? Today, we have 37 cities in an unincorporated area to pay for transfer stations and disposal solutions. We can choose, I think we should choose developing this capacity so we have it. We don't have to use all of the capacity, and some would argue, and I would even argue, that we should have some reserve capacity so that when we transfer to the next long-term and the true long-term disposal option, that we still have local reserve capacity at Cedar Hills. So even I wouldn't necessarily be promoting, let's fill Area 9 to its brim too. Be very powerful and important, I think, to retain some reserve capacity. So I think it's also important to realize that, okay, A, not planning, don't need to go above 788, just as the settlement agreement calls, and nothing prevents the region from implementing another alternative when they want to do that. This does not force us to fill Area 9 to its capacity. It simply ensures there'll be no gap in capacity.
Does that clarify your question, Paul, on information on height?
Yeah, it's what I heard before.
Okay, and Councilmember Walsh, I saw your hand.
Yeah, just to clarify, I wasn't saying that there was going to be an increase on the existing areas of cells 5, 6, or 7, which have the settlement agreement, but rather what it states in the plan is that will develop new cells within the existing footprint of the landfill and increase the height from the permitted 800 feet up to 830 feet, only to the extent that such activity would be consistent with the terms of the settlement agreement. So this is stating that cells 8 and 9, which are the new cells within the existing footprint of the landfill, could go up to 830 feet, which from my perspective is not something that the neighbors around there are looking forward to. And also, you know, it pulls at some of the ideas of, okay, well, the neighbors were told that Cedar Hills landfill would be completely filled up and has been extended several times. And so we're looking at cells 8 and 9 continuing to be an extension of that. And the extension into those areas is going to be at a higher level than the existing ones, which are regulated by the settlement agreement.
Thank you. Council President Martz.
Two things. First, on page 163 of the report, in regards to waste-to-energy facility, the quote is, "This option is not recommended as the next disposal option after 2028 for several reasons." So while it is certainly possible that anybody can go back and look at anything, this report says not to do it. Secondly, can we please bring up this table 6.1 that we've been discussing that's part of the packet?
Put it up on the overhead. Thank you.
Sorry, the packet got closed. Yeah.
Get the expert to put it up on the overhead.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Councilmember March, if I can address your comment, because I think it is, you make a very important point. This plan is all about addressing what do we do in 2028, because we've got until 2028 covered. So the context of it not recommending waste to energy in 2028 is because it's recommending we begin the new cell in 2028. Right? It's not intended to eliminate it from its future. It's intended to identify what's the next best solution beyond our current capacity. You might be able to type in that cell there.
There you go.
The page.
Well, sorry, it was, yeah, that's right, of the plan. There we go. So you were referring to the warm model. Can you walk me through the warm model numbers?
Sure. So the warm model, let me just, is the second column, or I'm sorry, the second row. It's a life cycle analysis, and it's the most generally accepted, again, in our regional system, in the U.S., under our regulatory model. And so you'll see there's actually the option of further develop Cedar Hills, compared to waste to export, and then compared to a waste to energy facility. In the first, in all three, the measures are in metric ton equivalents of CO2. Okay, it's the measuring the CO2 emissions. And in the first two, you'll see it's actually a negative number. And in the third, it's a positive number. The reason is, in fact, we do collect landfill gas. We don't just collect it. We used to destroy it through flares. We now transport it to a refinery on site operated by Bioenergy of Washington. And in fact, between Bioenergy of Washington, who purchases that gas from us, and the Puget Sound Energy Company that purchases the environmental attributes, they buy that landfill gas and the environmental attributes last year to the tune of about $8 million. So it's a real molecule that's being collected out of our landfill and ultimately sold. And because of that, And because they're, it's not going into the atmosphere, at least a majority of it. We estimate about a 95% effective rate of landfill gas capture, particularly at Cedar Hills. It actually has and you look at the environmental attributes associated with that renewable energy, right? We have a positive impact in terms of greenhouse gases. It's to a lesser effect at an out-of-county landfill, and that's because the way we're operating Cedar Hills is not normal. It's really above and beyond standard industry standard practices. So we take it to a much more extreme level to the benefit of the environment. It still has a reduction of greenhouse gases because even at those landfills, they're capturing and creating renewable energy. However, at a waste-to-energy facility, as I mentioned, it is incineration. And when you burn anything, there are emissions associated with it. Now, I want you to know that the numbers that you see, it's a range of anywhere between 12,000 to 80,000 metric ton equivalents in this case. Those are not the county numbers. Because we hired national experts to study the waste-to-energy model, because we know landfilling really well. We even know a little bit about waste export because of our local experience. We knew very little about waste export or waste-to-energy, so we hired the national experts. We hired the company that built and consulted on the most recent modern plant in West Palm Beach, Florida, and they gave us these numbers, right? So I think it's important to know these are not county numbers per se. We subscribe to them, but we're not the ones that calculated them. These came from the regional experts in terms of what the emissions are. And the third row is called annual greenhouse gas emissions. We actually produce a report. We're required to, as is every landfill in the nation, in terms of what happened, what is estimated to have happened in any given year. This does not take into account the life cycle process in terms of capturing of that renewable energy. And again, if you look at the actual kind of production levels, 91,000 metric ton equivalents estimated of emissions associated with Cedar Hills, about the same associated with waste export, and then about 1.2 million metric ton equivalents associated with a waste to energy. And again, it's just by the nature of the incineration. This is not a singular decision. This is not just an environmental decision. It's not just a financial decision. It's not just a siting decision. It's, these are individual elements that have to be considered. It's not a reason to do it or to not do it. It's just something that's got to be factored in.
Council President Mertz, did you have some additional questions on the table? Okay. Other council member comments and questions? We've got a motion on the table, moved and seconded, but this is your opportunity to dig in deeper with each other and with the staff that is here to get your questions answered. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to, Council President Martz.
Not a question. So if you look at where incinerators are being built in Europe, the argument is that incinerators have a smaller carbon footprint. I am admittedly not an expert. Thank you for clarifying these numbers. That's all I can say. And I can say that I believe the Scandinavian countries have a stronger commitment to environmental sustainability than the U.S. does in general, and it matters a great deal to me. I'm not ready today to say that we should move to incineration, but I'm not ready to say today that beyond 2028 we should not move to incineration. I think that I haven't been convinced on that, and I wish this report didn't lay out that path, because I believe it will, as a region, close the conversation about incineration. So that's why I'm going to continue to oppose it this evening.
Thank you, Council President Mertz. Would anybody else like to speak before I call for the vote? I was going to say Council Member Goodman.
I'm going to oppose as well. I was living in the area for 15 plus years when all of the largest controversy took place and the settlement came about. And I know that the communities in that area have struggled a bit with the landfill, and I'm just concerned that that area of the county does not get heard as loudly as other areas of the county. And I also know that the county council representatives oppose the plan, the ones who represent this area, the two of them represent this area. So I am going to oppose it as well and stand with the folks who live down there and the council members who voted against it.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Any other comments? Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I can completely understand that this is a very complex issue, and but I have to say, after hearing from our neighbors about this area and just have a long history of a lot of people that I know in that area, residents in that area that have really struggled, and I feel like this is such a long-term decision where, you know, one of the questions that I had asked was that there's a new report coming out about one of the options, the waste to energy, but yet that's coming out a month after this very, very important long-term vote. And those reasons make me uncomfortable. I wish that there could have been more of a roadmap presented, and I think that if we were having to look at the landfill as maybe, we talked about like a reserve, that kind of thing, but there was more of a roadmap in terms of we're going to do this, this, and this, and then these options are going to be further evaluated. But this is such an incredibly long-term decision to just expand the landfill, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to vote against this.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt, followed by Councilmember Ray.
I have a quick question. So I think that in the information that was presented earlier on, if the council were to not approve, then the direction was that it would be best if we could clearly articulate what we would like to see different. And so I'm just wondering if we are, because it sounds like there's a number of concerns, and so I'm wondering if we are clearly articulating those, and if not, if we should formalize that in some way.
Thank you for that. I'm going to let City Administrator Moon talk about options, because there's definitely a way to be able to express the concerns that have been listed tonight. City Administrator Moon.
Sure. So I think Micah laid out some basic options that you have as you vote. I think another option that perhaps wasn't listed on the slide is that council could direct staff to write a letter that helps express some of the thoughts, concerns, comments that you have brought forward tonight. And we would also, again, repeat whatever the vote was that you end up taking this evening, but that would be another avenue for you to utilize to express some of your ongoing concerns.
Councilmember Ray?
So I think I heard things a bit differently than some of my colleagues, because what I heard Pat say about the plan was, part of the plan is we're going to keep planning, and this isn't a forever plan. This isn't even a for 40 years plan. This is a for 5-year plan, and then we're coming back to it, and we're going to look at the options. And in the reality of it is, we have to keep planning, because any direction we go, be it the expansion of Cedar Hills or exporting or waste energy, is going to take time to implement. And I think that the approach that's outlined in this plan lays that out. And so from where I'm sitting, I think we need to continue with Cedar Hills, because that's what we've got. I think the presentation really laid out the fact that we're building that capacity. We don't have to use it, but we're building it so if we need it, it's there. I understand Council President Martz's concern about the greenhouse gases, but then again, I look at the data that's being presented here, and it is showing exactly the opposite, where the environmental impact is less doing landfill than it is doing waste to energy. So I don't know that that's a significant thing. And then I can't really help but look at this table at the top line and say, you know, we also have to be fiscally prudent, and there is a cost to these different options. And so from where I sit and the way I look at this very complex problem is we are on the right track with the plan that's been presented by King County.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Winterstein, followed by Councilmember Hunt.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have a question, Pat, if you may. On slide 5 of your presentation, it does talk about the next plan update will identify post-Cedar Hills disposal method, sub-bullet, start discussion well before the 5-year update cycle, and then you list some options: waste to energy, waste export by rail, other emerging technologies. Now, I'm familiar with long-range planning, and I know that, so for example, I'm part of the formation of Vision 2050, and I know long before 2050 there's going to be an update to that, probably inside about 10 years. So this idea to plan long, but then the cycle shorter of that is, so when I listened to you and I heard the slide, well, that's what I assumed you were doing here. Matter of fact, you said it sounds like there's an update in about 5 years. Tell us about that update, because my takeaway was that this plan, if not comprehensively, will receive some update in a 5-year cycle, and that I thought you said between then and now, you will be studying these other alternatives. I took that to mean that in this update in about 5 years, there could be revisions to this plan to reflect what happens during this study.
Yes, great question. So, speaking specifically to that, as soon as this is adopted, because it's not adopted yet, and in fact, the cities will take action, then the State Department of Ecology takes action, so we've got a couple of months ahead of us. But as soon as it's adopted, we have to take the next steps in the plan. My council, the King County Council, has directed me to bring them a plan for that plan, for me to articulate specifically how am I going to engage our regional stakeholders to identify and assess and ultimately select these options that we're talking about, the ones that we know of as export and waste energy and probably something else. And so I have to deliver that plan in 2021 to our King County Council. That's kind of the plan for the plan. You know, this is a very challenging task for us to take on. And we do have to be very sensitive to our neighbors around our facilities, not just the neighbors around our landfill, but you know, we have 1.5 million users of the system that we have to be responsible to. You know, not 4,000, but 1.5 million that we have to address financial, environmental, and service aspects to. So we are going to benefit from this October study that's coming in on waste to energy. We will use our advisory committees, again, that Micah is actively participating in. We'll be back at the regional city councils to engage and benefit from their input, because whatever we choose, be it waste to energy, waste export, or something else, the other decision that has to be made in this next 5-year period is who's a part of that system. As Councilmember pointed out, the top line is one of the other elements. You know, how much are we willing to pay to do what's best for our region, and who's going to be a part of that? We are not limited to this regional system as we know it today. Today, we know it as 37 cities in the unincorporated area. Is it going to be 37 cities? Is it going to be 47? Is it going to be 12? We need to know that when we're choosing this next solution. The financial estimates that you see here are assuming that there are 37 cities that want to be a part of that particular system. And I don't know that that's going to be true. Maybe we're going to have more, and maybe we're going to have less. And so part of the plan is not just, well, what is the best regional system, but what's the regional system comprised of in that scenario? So we will have that over the next 5 years.
Thank you. I think, if I'm tracking correctly, it's Councilmember Hunt.
I really appreciate all of the thoughtful comments that have been made and the different perspectives. I am going to be in support of the plan, and my reasons are that I know that our community does care a lot about climate change, and I absolutely do believe that climate change is an existential threat and that it's very important. It's something that we should do what we can as a city to address. And I also think we should continue to revisit other technologies, and they may change over time and get better over time as technologies do. And I also think we should absolutely be continuing to look as a region at what other countries in the world are doing, and we should make sure that we are using best practices. But I also think that on council, we are often presented with information, and we have to make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time. And I see this table and I find it very compelling. So specifically to me, the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions that says that it's negative 134,000 metric ton equivalents for the further developed Cedar Hills options versus a positive of 12,000 to 80,000 metric ton equivalents. I find that large negative number very compelling, and that's the information that we have. And then also the annual greenhouse gas emissions is lower for further developed Cedar Hills in the information that we have. So I think we were presented with data to support that this plan is laying the path forward that will produce the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, and I also think it is a plan, and there should absolutely be revisited in the future, but based on the information provided, I'm in support.
Wow, great night. Anybody else who would like to provide comments or discussion with your fellow council members or to ask for any clarifications from staff? Council President Martz.
Just as an example of how complicated of a topic this is, so I'm looking at an article from a chemical engineering professor at the University of Manchester, is published in what I believe to be a peer-reviewed journal, and the conclusion was waste incineration offers significant savings of greenhouse gases compared to disposal by landfill. And they compared landfills with biogas recovery with both systems co-generating heat and electricity. I'm not trying to put one paper against another table. I'm just saying it is a complicated topic, and I'm not ready to close out that topic. I really feel that the language that I quoted from page 163 of the report is too will foreclose, with all due respect to the possibility, of course, the region could revisit it, but I just think it's premature to talk about the solution beyond 2028. I just wanted to reiterate that it's not a resolved scientific issue. Thanks.
Any other comments before we go to the vote? Deputy Council President Batiste? No.
I was just saying that.
If the council wishes to have additional information provided, it's really up to you to ask questions, and I'll have people answer. So I usually don't go back and tell staff it's time to interject. So what are your thoughts? Should we take some additional information?
Call the question.
Sorry?
Call the question.
Okay, you ready for the vote? Okay. Sorry. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2875, adopting the final 2019 Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan prepared by King County as an update to the 2001 Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan, adopted by ordinance number 2333. It has been moved and seconded, and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Can I have hands as well, please? Thank you. All those in opposition signify by saying aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Nay. Okay. All those opposed? Did I see your hands? Thank you. The motion fails 4-3 with
3 to 4.
3 to 4. And then I'd also like to put the option on the table too that the city administrator mentioned. You've had a great discussion tonight. There are a lot of varying reasons why folks are in favor or opposed, and if you would like to have the administration prepare a letter for the council to send to King County to provide some context around the vote this evening. Is that something you'd like to do? And I'm seeing heads nod. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation this evening. The next item on the agenda is good of the order. Do council members have anything for good of the order? Council President Martz and Deputy Council President Batiste.
So I just want to comment on the special presentation we had earlier this evening. You know, there's two kinds of leadership. There's the leadership that's sort of methodically planned out and people marshal their resources towards a certain goal and they accomplish that goal. And then there's a second kind of leadership where people find themselves in situations and sort of have to sum up, you know, the plans kind of go out the window and they're just sort of history calls upon them at that moment and they rise up to that occasion. And City Administrator Moon was absolutely in that latter category. She's a consummate professional. I'm quite confident she has a master plan and it didn't involve being city administrator a year and a half ago. But nonetheless, she rolled up her sleeves. She saw us through you know, several of the most important issues that have come our way in the decade that I've been involved, closing out the moratorium, adoption of the strategic plan, restructuring of the finance department and the budget process. And so though she's been here for 5 years, though she was only our city administrator for a year and a half, when history called, she responded magnificently, and I want to thank her so much for her service.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Council President Batiste.
Just to follow up on our special presentation, I just wanted to also say, it's been really amazing to see the transition that we've gone through and all of the different complicated things that the city administrator and specifically Emily needed to manage, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to work with you, and you are such an amazing hard worker, and just the communication and everything that we needed from the council perspective as we're going through our recruitment effort and being asked to talk about what does a city administrator do. It's been interesting to think about that because it really is such a complicated everything under the sun type of job, and we're going to miss you very much. There are huge shoes to fill, and very excited for your new adventure.
Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Winterstein.
I'll be short. I'll plus one to all that, and I will just say, I hope you have the best year of your life.
Equally short. You're going to be missed. And still, thank you for recruiting and bringing Andrea on. I'm glad that we're going to have some continuity going forward. Mayor Polly, I know that you're putting your heart and soul into the replacement effort as well. But there will be no replacing, and I too have a blast. Have fun. I know you will. I can't wait to hear about it. Thanks.
Great comments. Anything else for good of the order? Because I'm just going to pile on this a little bit and just also say that only having 18 months of mayoral experience and working with Emily in that role for 18 months, I am amazed at many of the things that we got accomplished in a short period of time because of her ability to really push and drive hard on certain projects, especially the strategic plan, an overview and overhaul of our financial systems and the way we do that work. There is a lot that happened in a really short period of time. So I have no doubt that she has built up a wonderful resume of accomplishments that she will be able to share if she chooses not to become a goat herder or farmer in Argentina. So awesome. Thank you very much. I do have some other items for good of the order. It's mostly about upcoming meetings, but I would like to go through those if there's nothing else to add. On August 12th, we will be having a special council meeting at 5:30, and the potential items include an executive session and potentially a city administrator appointment. On August 12th, Council Committee work session is at 6:30 that evening, and the potential agenda items are the 2019 Shoreline Master Program periodic update, fluoridation policy discussion, water treatment plant, and Vision 2050 regional growth strategy, a whole bunch of small things. Those are all big, big, complicated items. August 14th, a special council committee work session, 6:30 p.m., the proposed 2020 budget financial forecast. And that's an awful lot of work to do in the summer, a little more than we normally take on. We are still canceling at this point in time the August 19th regular council meeting. Looking into September, at the regular council meeting on September 3rd, some potential agenda items are the intent to adopt a sales and use tax for affordable housing, national community survey results, and an update on fire services and facility needs. We do have an executive session this evening. So as earlier announced, there will be an executive session to discuss qualifications of an applicant for public employment per RCW 42.30.110 paren 1 paren G. This item is expected to last 15 minutes, and no action is expected to follow in open session. We'll now recess into executive session at 9:39.